I found out my marriage was being refinanced on a Wednesday afternoon from a voicemail I almost deleted. Unknown number. Calm female voice. Professional. Hi, this is Tara with Northbridge Title. I'm confirming your signing appointment for Friday at 3 p.m. regarding the cash-out refinance on 114 Larkspur Drive. If you need to reschedule, please call. My address. My house. My throat went dry, but my hands didn't shake. Not yet. Because for a second my brain did that polite thing it does when reality shows up with a knife and you ought to believe it's just a spoon. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe someone typed the wrong number. Maybe there's another Larkspur Drive. There isn't. We live in Maple Ridge Estates. There's only one Larkspur. The HOA sends emails about trash cans like it's national security. I listened again. Then again. Cash out refinance. Those 3 words landed heavier than cheating ever could. Cheating hurts your heart. A cash out refinance hurts your future. I sat in my truck outside a job site and stared at the dashboard like it might give me instructions. Then I did the one thing I've trained myself to do over 15 years of being the steady one. I didn't react. I documented. I saved the voicemail. I took a screenshot of the call log. Then I called the number back from my work line, not my cell, because habits matter when you're building a record. A receptionist answered. I asked for Tara. Tara came on the line bright and efficient, the way people sound when they believe they're talking to someone who's already agreed. Hi, yes, are you confirming Friday? She asked. Before I confirm anything, I said, keeping my voice calm, can you tell me what name is on the file? There was a pause. Keyboard tapping. I have Heather Collinson's spouse, she said. Heather. My wife. And spouse, she added, as if that part was a formality. Great, I said. What's the email address listed? She read it out. It wasn't mine. It wasn't even Heather's. It was something new, something clean, something that sounded like a business, not a person. Can you repeat that? I asked. She did. Okay, I said. And the phone number on file? She read it out. Not mine. Not Heather's. A third number. Another line. I stared through the windshield at a row of identical houses in the distance, all of them sitting on their foundations like they trusted the ground. Ma'am, I said, I did not authorize any refinance. I did not authorize any signing appointment, and that is not my email. I need you to flag this as potentially fraudulent. The air on the other end changed. The brightness drained out of her voice. I'm sorry, Tara said carefully. Do you live at 114 Larkspur? Yes, I said. And your name? Daniel Collins. More keyboard tapping. Longer this time. Sir, she said, I'm going to escalate this to our compliance manager. May I ask, are you and your spouse separated? No, I said. At least I didn't think so this morning. Another pause. I understand, she said softly. Please don't confront anyone yet. I'm going to place a hold on the signing and mark the file for review. Thank you, I said. When I hung up, I sat there in the truck and waited for the feeling people always describe in stories like this. The rage. The panic. The urge to drive home and blow up my life in one dramatic scene. It didn't come. What came was something colder. A memory, like a clip in my head I'd watched too many times but never understood. Heather at the kitchen counter 3 weeks ago, smiling too brightly while she said, I found us a better option. Heather lately had been saying us the way people say my team when they mean my plan. A month ago, she'd gotten into personal finance. That's what she called it. Podcasts, spreadsheets, a new obsession with leveraging equity. It had sounded like responsible adulthood. It had also sounded like someone reading a script. She started taking calls in the garage because the kids are loud. She started leaving for a walk when it was dark because I clear my head better at night. She started showing me houses on her phone the way you show someone a new restaurant, casual and light, like it's not a decision. "Look," she'd say, "this one has a pool." As if our kids needed a pool more than they needed the home they already knew. I'd nodded. I'd smiled. I'd made neutral noises like a man who believed this was just a phase. And now I was sitting in my truck realizing my wife had a title company on standby. Not for a dream. For a transaction. I drove back to my office, not home. Because home was where emotion lives. Office is where you can think. I pulled my credit report on my lunch break and found a new inquiry from a lender I didn't recognize. I called the lender's fraud department and, after 40 minutes on hold, got a man named Raj who sounded like he'd heard this story before. "Sir," he said, "if you did not initiate this application, we will open an investigation. I'm going to ask a few questions." He asked the basics. Then he asked one that made my stomach clench. "Do you have reason to believe a family member might have access to your personal information?" Family member. The polite way of saying spouse. "Yes," I said. Raj didn't judge. He just sighed like a man who lives in paperwork. "We'll put a freeze on the file," he said. "I also recommend you place a fraud alert with all 3 bureaus today." I did. Then I called my friend Mark. Mark is the kind of friend you want when your life is turning into a legal situation. He's a lawyer, yes. But more than that, he's the kind of person who doesn't get distracted by emotion. He can care about you and still think clearly. It's a rare combination. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Dan," he said, "you sound like you're swallowing glass." "I got a voicemail," I said. "Title company, cash out refinance, Friday, my address." Silence on his end, then one controlled exhale. "Okay," Mark said, "do not confront her." "Not yet." "I wasn't planning to," I said, and that surprised me because it was true. "Good," he replied. "Step 1, secure the financial damage." Freeze credit, notify lender, notify title sounds like you started. "Yes," I said. "Step 2, he continued, we gather evidence legally. We don't break laws. We don't hack. We don't do anything that makes you look unstable." I swallowed. Because unstable is what people like Heather and her new friends like to paint you as when their plan depends on your reaction. "What's step 3, I asked. Mark's voice went lower. "Step 3, he said, we protect the house. Physically and legally." "How?" I asked. "Change online passwords," he said. "Banking, email, mortgage portal." "And Dan, listen, if you suspect she has unauthorized access to your accounts, you document and you take it to the right channels." "I hear you," I said. He paused. "And Dan," he added, "who's helping her?" That was the question I'd been avoiding. Because it's one thing to imagine your spouse doing something impulsive. It's another to picture someone else coaching them. "I don't know," I said. Mark didn't believe me, and neither did I. Heather wasn't a details person. Heather is charming. Social. The kind of person who can make the cashier smile just by asking how their day is going. But Heather is not the kind of person who sets up a refinance file with a new email, a new phone number, and a signing appointment. That takes a guide. A hand on the steering wheel. When I got home that night, Heather was in the kitchen humming while she stirred pasta sauce like the world was normal. Our daughter Lily, 13, was at the table doing homework with headphones in. Our son Nate, 8, was on the floor building something with blocks, narrating his own little universe. I walked in and Heather smiled, the smile she's been wearing lately, bright, slightly too wide, like she's trying to convince me of something. "Hey," she said. "You're late." "Long day," I said. "Dinner's almost ready," she replied. "I made your favorite." My favorite. As if that was relevant to what was happening. As if food can soften a contract. I kissed Lily's head. I ruffled Nate's hair. I let myself be normal for them. Then I looked at Heather and said the safest sentence I could find. "Can we talk later?" Just us. Heather's eyes flicked quick, not fear, calculation. Sure, she said lightly. Everything okay? Yeah, I lied. And she nodded like she accepted that lie the way you accept a receipt you don't plan to keep. After the kids went to bed, Heather poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one like a peace offering. She sat close on the couch, leaning into my shoulder the way she always does when she wants me to stop asking questions. You've been distant, she said. I stared at the TV screen, black and reflective. I could see our outlines like strangers. I've been busy, I said. She sighed softly. I'm trying to make things better for us. There it was again. Us? What do you mean? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Heather smiled, careful. You know, financially, long term, we have equity just sitting there, Dan. We could use it. My pulse ticked once. Not fast. Just a week. Use it for what? I asked. Heather shrugged like it was obvious. Renovations, savings, maybe, options. Options. That word tasted like exit. Okay, I said. Are you talking to a lender? Heather's smile held for a half-second too long. Then she laughed lightly. Why? Just curious, I said. Heather's eyes narrowed slightly. Dan, are you worried about something? This was the opening. The moment where most people either explode or accuse. I didn't. I took a slow breath and I said, Did you schedule a signing appointment for a cash-out refinance on Friday? The room went still. Heather didn't gasp. She didn't ask what I was talking about. She did the thing she's been doing more and more lately. She went to defense first. Why would you say that? She asked, voice sharp. I watched her face. Marriage teaches you what your person looks like when they're surprised. Heather didn't look surprised. She looked caught. I got a voicemail, I said calmly. Heather's jaw tightened. A voicemail from who? Title company, I said. Confirming Friday at 3. Heather stared at my wine glass like she wanted it to explain itself. Then she did something that told me everything I needed to know. She softened her tone. She reached for my hand. Okay, she said gently, so maybe I explored it. Just explored. Because you've been stressed, and I didn't want to dump more on you. Dump more on me. As if taking money out of our house is a small thing. Whose email is on the file? I asked. Heather blinked. What? The email on the file, I repeated. It's not mine, it's not yours. Heather's fingers tightened around mine. I don't know, she said quickly. Maybe they typed it wrong. Also the phone number, I added. Not mine, not yours. Heather's face changed. Just a flicker. Then she leaned back and crossed her arms like she was offended. Dan, she said, why are you interrogating me? Interrogating. Another word people use when they want you to feel guilty for asking reasonable questions. I'm asking because someone tried to refinance our house without me, I said. Heather's eyes flashed. Without you? That's dramatic. It's accurate, I replied. She scoffed and stood. You're acting paranoid. There it was. The word Mark warned me about. Paranoid. I stayed sitting. Because standing turns conversations into fights. And fights are what they want. Fights become stories. Stories become leverage. I'm not paranoid, I said calmly. I'm informed. Heather stared down at me like I'd insulted her. You didn't trust me enough to talk to me, she snapped, but you trust some voicemail. I looked up at her. I trusted you enough to marry you. Her expression tightened. And then she played her next card. You've been so controlling lately, she said, voice rising, watching every little thing I do. Making me feel like I'm doing something wrong. Watching. That word hit me like a warning. Because it meant she already suspected something about my calm. It meant she was preparing to paint me as the problem. I stood slowly and said, "I'm going to bed." Heather threw her hands up. "Of course, you shut down. That's what you do." I didn't answer, because answering would give her something to quote. In bed, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and listened to Heather move around the house downstairs like she was restless. At 1:12 a.m., my phone buzzed with an email notification. Password change request. Mortgage portal. My stomach dropped into something cold. I opened the email. The reset link had been requested. Not by me. I didn't click anything. I opened the app directly and tried to log in. Wrong password. Once. Twice. Locked out. I sat up in the dark and felt the first real wave of anger try to rise. Not hot anger. Not yelling anger. The kind that sharpens you. I went to the kitchen quietly and checked the drawer where we kept the spare documents. Birth certificates. Social security cards. Deed copy. Old tax papers. The folder was there, but it had been moved. Slightly. The way something looks when someone tried to put it back exactly and didn't know your habits. I pulled it out and flipped through. The deed copy was missing. The old mortgage statement was missing. A small, specific theft. Not a random rummage. A project. The next morning I drove Lily to school and Nate to his elementary drop-off like nothing was happening. I smiled. I asked about their days. I acted like the stable father I actually am. Then I went straight to the county recorder's office on my lunch break. It's a bland building with fluorescent lights and people who move slowly because they deal in permanent things. I took a number. I waited. I kept my face neutral. When my number was called, I told the clerk I needed to check recent activity on my property. She pulled it up on her screen. And there it was. A preliminary notice filed 2 days ago. Title work initiated. Not a deed transfer. Not yet. But the fingerprints were there. Someone had started the process. The clerk slid me a printout. It listed a contact email. That clean business-sounding email again. I thanked her and walked out with paper in my hands that felt like a warning. In my truck, I called Mark. He didn't waste time. "Okay," he said. "We move faster." "What do I do?" I asked. "2 things today," he said. 1. You file a written fraud notice with the lender and the title company. 2. You change your personal email passwords and put multi-factor on everything. "I already did the credit freeze," I said. "Good," he replied, "and install cameras. Exterior and interior." I hesitated because cameras feel like crossing a line. Mark didn't hesitate. "This is no longer about feelings," he said. "This is about protecting yourself from a narrative. Cameras protect you from stories." That afternoon I bought 2 cameras. Simple ones, not hidden spy gear. Just security devices, because that's what they are when someone is trying to use your house like a bank. I installed one facing the front door, one facing the hallway that leads to the office. Then I sat in my truck for 10 minutes and stared at the camera feed like a man watching his own life from outside. At 4:46 p.m., Heather pulled into the driveway. She walked in smiling and said, "Hey!" I grabbed groceries. She talked brightly about nothing. And I realized something terrifying. Heather wasn't panicked. Heather was confident, which meant she believed she had control. I needed to know who gave her that confidence. That night, after the kids were in bed, Heather went into the garage for one of her calls. I watched her through the kitchen window. She paced. She smiled. She nodded. Then she laughed softly, the kind of laugh that isn't for jokes. When she came back inside, she looked energized. Not guilty. Not nervous. Energized. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Can we reset?" The word reset hit wrong. "Reset what?" I asked. Our communication, she said, sweet as sugar. I don't want us fighting. We're not fighting, I said. I'm asking questions. Heather's eyes narrowed slightly. Because you don't trust me. I leaned back and said, who are you talking to about the refinance? Heather blinked, then smiled. No one. I watched her mouth, the way it formed the lie too smoothly. Okay, I said. Then show me your phone. She froze. The silence was loud. Then she laughed like I was ridiculous. Absolutely not, she said. That was all the answer I needed. I didn't push. I didn't argue. I just nodded slowly, like I accepted it. Heather looked relieved, which told me she thought she won. She went upstairs, kissed me on the forehead like a mother to a child, and said, "Get some sleep." After she went to bed, I checked the camera feed from my phone. At 11:32 p.m., headlights swept across our driveway. A car pulled up and didn't park in front. It parked across the street, half hidden behind a tree. A man got out. He didn't walk to our front door. He walked to the side gate, like he'd been here before. My heart didn't race. It dropped into something certain. The man wore a jacket with the collar up. He moved with the confidence of someone who believes rules are for other people. He came up to our back patio door and tried the handle. It was locked. He tried again. Then he stepped back and looked toward the street, as if checking whether anyone was watching. He pulled out his phone and typed something. A second later, Heather's phone lit up on my nightstand upstairs. I couldn't see the screen from where I was, but I could see the glow. Heather sat up in bed. I watched her silhouette. She got out quietly and walked down the stairs. At 11:36 p.m., my camera caught her opening the back door. She didn't look startled. She didn't look angry. She opened it like she was letting in someone expected. The man stepped inside, and then the camera caught his face when he turned toward the kitchen light. It wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't a friend. It was a man I'd seen twice before in my life, in the most boring setting possible. At our bank. His name was Evan Price. He'd introduced himself months ago at a financial workshop. Heather insisted we attend at the community center. He wore a suit that looked expensive and a smile that looked practiced. He shook my hand, looked me in the eyes, and said, "We help families build smarter futures." Heather had been impressed. I'd been politely skeptical. Now Evan Price was standing in my kitchen at midnight. Heather led him toward the dining room table. She slid something across the surface. Paper. A folder. He opened it and pointed at a page like a teacher. Heather nodded. Then she signed something. I didn't see what. The camera was too far for the words. But I saw the motion. Signature. And I saw Evan's hand move across the paper, guiding, teaching, controlling. At 11:49 p.m., Evan closed the folder, tucked it under his arm, and walked out the back door. Heather locked it behind him. Then she stood there for a second alone, staring at the door like she was listening to the silence settle. And then she did something that made my blood go cold. She smiled. Not a happy smile. A satisfied one. Like the project was on schedule. I saved the footage. I backed it up twice. And then I went back upstairs and lay down beside her like I didn't know our marriage had just become evidence. The next day I didn't confront her. I didn't even change my tone. I made breakfast. I took Nate to school. I asked Lily about her math quiz. I became a calm man with a knife behind his back, except the knife was paperwork. At 10:15 a.m., I called Tara at the title company again and told her there was an unauthorized third party entering my home to facilitate signing documents. I asked for the name of the notary assigned to Friday. Tara's voice went tight. "Sir, the file is on hold," she said. "But I can tell you the notary is independent." "Give me the name," I said calmly. She did. I looked the notary up online. Then I called and left a voicemail that was simple and clear. Hi. My name is Daniel Collins. If you have any appointment scheduled at 114 Larkspur Drive, please be advised I do not consent, and there is a potential fraud investigation. I have documentation. No drama. Just a record. Then I called Mark and told him everything. The midnight visitor. The signing motions. The name. Mark was quiet, then said, "Good. This is good." "It doesn't feel good," I said. "It's good because it's clear," he replied. "And because now we can act." "What's next?" I asked. Mark's voice sharpened. "Next," he said, "we make sure no one signs anything on Friday." "How?" I asked. "We show up," Mark said, "calm, documented. And we do it in a way that protects you." Friday came faster than it should have. Heather behaved like a woman who believed she was walking toward a prize. She dressed nicely, not fancy, just intentional. At breakfast she said, "I have an appointment this afternoon." "With who?" I asked, casual. "With a friend," she said. The lie was so smooth I almost admired it. "Okay," I said. "Do you want me to pick up Nate?" Heather smiled. "That'd be great." At 2:45 p.m., I didn't go to Nate's school. I sat in my parked truck down the street with Mark beside me, both of us watching my own driveway like we were surveilling a stranger's house. Mark had a folder on his lap with printed exhibits, the voicemail transcript, the recorder's notice, the lender inquiry, the camera stills of Evan entering, Heather opening the door. Paper armor. At 2:58 p.m., a white sedan pulled up. A woman stepped out carrying a small bag and a clipboard. The notary. She walked to my front door and rang the bell. Heather answered immediately. "Smile on." The notary introduced herself. Heather waved her inside like a hostess. And then I got out of my truck and walked up my own driveway like a man going to a normal appointment, not the moment his marriage officially became a legal battleground. Mark stayed behind me, but close enough to be felt. Heather saw me and froze. For the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely surprised. "Dan," she said, voice tight, "what are you doing home?" I kept my tone mild. "I got a reminder call," I said, looking at the notary. "About the signing appointment." Heather's eyes flashed. "This is not—" "Hi," Mark said politely to the notary. He held up his bar card like it was a badge. "Mark Alvarez, attorney. Before any documents are signed, you need to be aware there is a dispute of consent and an active fraud report." The notary blinked, startled. "I'm sorry, I—" Heather's voice rose. "This is insane." Mark stayed calm. "Ma'am, it's not insane. It's documented." "He does not consent." Heather turned on me, and her smile vanished completely. "You're humiliating me," she hissed. I looked at her and said quietly, "You invited a notary to our house behind my back." Heather's eyes darted to the notary like she wanted to control the audience. "Can we step outside?" she demanded. I nodded. "Sure, sure." We stepped onto the porch. Heather lowered her voice, sharp and furious. "You have no idea what you're doing," she said. "I think I do," I replied. Her eyes narrowed. "Evan said you were going to do this. He said you'd freak out." I almost smiled, but it came out sad. "You know what's funny?" I said. "I didn't freak out. I prepared." Heather's face twitched. Then she went to her last weapon. "You're controlling," she whispered. "You're trying to trap me." "Trap her?" "As if the house is a cage and not a home we built." "I'm not trapping you," I said. "I'm stopping you from stealing from me." Heather's breath hitched. "Stealing?" "I'm your wife." "That doesn't give you the right to forge me," I said. Heather's eyes widened slightly. "Forge?" she repeated. Mark stepped closer, calm and deadly in the way lawyers can be. "We have footage of an unlicensed third party presenting documents in your home," Mark said. We have a recorded title confirmation call. We have a recorder's notice. We have an inquiry on his credit. This will not go the way you think it will." Heather's face drained of color. She turned toward the front door and called too loudly, "Evan." Silence. Of course, Evan wasn't there. Evan is the kind of man who coaches you into risk and then disappears when consequences show up. The notary stepped outside, clipboard hugged to her chest. "I'm sorry," she said to Heather. "I can't proceed. Without clear consent, it's against policy." Heather's mouth opened and closed like she wanted to argue with reality. Then she snapped at the notary, "Fine. Leave." The notary didn't need to be told twice. She walked quickly down my driveway like she'd seen enough. Heather stood on my porch shaking with anger. Not grief, not regret. Anger that the plan failed. And in that moment something in me settled. Not satisfaction. Clarity. Because now I knew exactly what this was. Not a mistake. Not a phase. A project. And I was the obstacle. That night, Heather didn't come to bed. She stayed downstairs, making phone calls in a whisper voice that wasn't quiet enough. At 1:03 a.m., my phone buzzed with an email from Evan Price. Subject line, "Let's be adults." The audacity was almost impressive. The email was short. "Dan, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Heather deserves her freedom. The kids deserve peace. Stop trying to control the outcome. Let's find a solution." He wrote like he was a mediator, like he was a family friend, like he hadn't been in my kitchen at midnight guiding my wife's pen. Mark told me not to respond, so I didn't. Instead, I forwarded it to Mark and saved it in my folder. Paper armor doesn't work if you throw it away. Over the next week, Heather's behavior shifted. She stopped being sweet. She started being strategic. She told Lily, "Your dad's stressed." She told Nate, "Daddy's busy." She told my mother on the phone in the garage, "Dan is accusing me of crazy things." And then on Tuesday, she filed for divorce. Not because she was heartbroken, because the refinance plan didn't work and she needed another route. The petition included a request for exclusive use of the home for stability. Stability. That word again. I read it 3 times and felt the urge to laugh. Because stability was her costume. The real script was, "Get me out, then take the asset." Mark filed our response with calm precision. We submitted exhibits. Voicemail. Recorder's notice. Credit inquiry. Camera stills. Evan's email. Mark's wording was boring in the way truth is boring when it's properly documented. The judge scheduled a temporary orders hearing. A month later, we sat in a small courtroom that smelled like old carpet and quiet consequences. Heather wore a blazer and a brave face. Evan wasn't sitting beside her. He wasn't even in the room. Of course. Heather's attorney started with the narrative. "Your Honor, my client is concerned about the children. Mr. Collins has become suspicious and controlling. He has installed cameras. He has confronted third parties. He is creating an unstable environment." I watched Heather while her attorney spoke. Heather nodded at the right times, eyes glossy, like a woman rehearsed in looking wounded. Then Mark stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult anyone. He just handed the bailiff a stack of paper and said, "Your Honor, we'd like to submit exhibits A through H." The judge looked annoyed, then curious. Mark played the voicemail. The judge's expression changed when my address was spoken. Mark showed the recorder's notice. Mark showed the credit inquiry. Mark showed the still of Heather opening the door at night. Mark showed the still of Evan Price inside my kitchen. Mark said one sentence that made the room go colder. "Your Honor, this is not a case of paranoia. This is a documented attempted financial transaction without informed spousal consent." Heather's attorney tried to object. The judge lifted a hand. Heather's eyes darted. For the first time, she looked less like a victim and more like a person realizing the story isn't working. The judge asked Heather directly, "Mrs. Collins, did you initiate a refinance application without your husband's knowledge?" Heather swallowed. She could lie, but lying in court with exhibits on the table is like trying to hide smoke in a glass jar. "No," she said quietly. "I explored options." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Did you provide consent for a third party to access the home to facilitate signing documents?" Heather's voice tightened. "It was a meeting." The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Cobb, home equity is not a casual discussion. Title signatures are not meetings." Heather's cheeks flushed. Mark stayed still. Paper armor doesn't gloat. It just stands. The judge denied Heather's request for exclusive use of the home. She ordered temporary financial restraints. No refinancing. No selling. No new debt. The house stayed put. The kids stayed in their routine. Heather didn't get her clean exit. And that was when the real betrayal showed itself. Not in romance. In revenge. 2 weeks later, Lily came home from school quiet. She sat at the kitchen table and didn't take her headphones out. "Hey," I said gently. "Everything okay?" She looked up at me with eyes too old for 13. "Mom told people you're spying on her," she said. My chest tightened. "She said you have cameras everywhere," Lily continued. "She said you're scary." I sat down slowly. "I'm not scary," I said softly. "I'm careful." Lily's mouth trembled slightly, but she held it together because she's my kid and she's strong. "She said you don't want her to be happy," Lily whispered. There it was. The narrative pivot. If she couldn't take the house through paperwork, she'd try to take it through reputation. I wanted to call Heather and scream. I didn't. I called Mark. Mark sighed like he'd been waiting for this. "Okay," he said. "Now we add the fourth layer of armor." "What's that?" I asked. "Communication boundaries," he replied. "Everything through parenting app, everything documented. No private whispers, no garage calls, no third-party coaching." And then Mark said the sentence that made my stomach drop again. "Dan," he said, "we need to talk about Evan." "What about him?" I asked. Mark paused. "He's not just a finance guy," Mark said. "I pulled his license number. He doesn't have one." My blood went cold. "What does he have?" I asked. "A history," Mark said. "Civil complaints, 2 prior restraining orders, and an LLC registered under a different name." I stared at my wall at the family photo where Heather still smiled like my wife. "Dan," Mark continued, "this wasn't a random affair. This was a pattern. He targets households with equity. He uses relationships as access." I swallowed hard. Cheating. It wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was a tool. A way in. A way to make you hesitate while they move money. That night, after the kids were asleep, I opened the camera app again, more out of habit than fear. At 11:18 p.m., a car rolled slowly past my house. Then it came back. Then it parked across the street, half hidden again. A figure sat inside, engine off, watching. Not breaking in. Not doing anything dramatic. Just present. A reminder. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Because I knew how this game worked now. They wanted me to look reactive. I took a screenshot. I logged the time. I let the camera record. 2 days later, Heather showed up at my door in the afternoon unexpectedly. She didn't knock. She used her key. Still her key, because Mark told me not to change locks without proper notice. Paper armor, not impulsive armor. Heather walked in smiling like she was coming home. "I brought the kids snacks," she said brightly. I stood in the hallway and said, "You can't just walk in whenever you want." Heather's smile flickered. This is my home too, she said. It's the kids' home, I replied. And it's under court orders. We followed the plan. Heather's eyes narrowed. Evan says you're going to drag this out, she said softly. There it was again. Evan says. Like he was her compass now. I looked at Heather and asked the simplest question. Do you love him? I asked. Heather froze. Her mouth opened, then shut. Then she laughed bitterly. This isn't about love, she said. And that was the most honest thing she'd said in months. It's about getting out, she continued, voice sharper. It's about not being stuck. By stuck, you mean married? I said quietly. Heather's eyes flashed. By stuck, I mean living a life where I have to ask permission to breathe. I stared at her, and I realized something that hurt but also clarified. Heather wasn't leaving because she hated me. Heather was leaving because she'd been convinced she deserved a different life, and Evan offered her a shortcut. Shortcuts always come with a price. Heather stepped closer and lowered her voice. If you sign a simple settlement, she said, we can end this. You keep the house. I take a payout. We move on. I almost laughed, because now she was offering the deal she tried to steal. But the payout wouldn't be clean. It would be padded. It would be weaponized. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. Heather's eyes hardened. Then you're making me do this the hard way. The exact phrase. The one her smile promised weeks ago. She turned and walked out without another word. That night I came home from picking up Nate and found my front door slightly open. Not kicked in. Not broken. Just open. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like my body lagged behind my brain. I stepped inside carefully. The house was quiet. Nothing looked disturbed. No drawers dumped. No chaos. Which was worse, because chaos is amateur. This was professional. I walked straight to my office and checked my file box. The box was there, but the lid was cracked open. Inside, my folder of printed exhibits had been shifted. Not taken. Shifted. As if someone wanted me to know they'd touched it. On top of the papers sat a single sheet of clean white printer paper. One line typed in the center. Stop playing lawyer. My mouth went dry. I didn't call Heather. I didn't call Evan. I called Mark. Mark listened and then said, okay. Now we go on offense. What does that mean? I asked. It means we get a protective order, he said. And we notify the court about potential intimidation. I swallowed. Do you have it on camera? Mark asked. I opened the app and scrolled. At 7:42 p.m., while I was out, the front door opened. Heather walked in. 2 minutes later, Evan walked in behind her. No hesitation. No knocking. He moved through my hallway like he owned the place. He went straight to my office. He opened the file box. He placed the paper. Then he looked directly at the camera and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A warning smile. A man smiling because he believes fear is leverage. I stared at his face on my phone screen and felt something solidify in me. It wasn't fear. It was resolve. Because intimidation only works if you're alone. And I wasn't. Mark filed the motion the next morning. The court took it seriously because courts love what I'd learned to love, clear records. The judge signed an order barring Evan from my property and requiring Heather to communicate only through the parenting app. Heather called me furious. I didn't answer. She messaged me 100 different versions of the same thing. You're ruining my life. You're punishing me. You're controlling. I didn't respond. I responded with documentation. A month later, Evan Price was arrested. Not because of me alone. Because people like Evan don't run one project, they run a pattern. My evidence became one piece in a bigger case: unlicensed financial solicitation, document fraud, intimidation. Heather didn't cry when she heard. She didn't apologize. She just went quiet, like someone whose ladder got kicked out from under them. Divorce proceeded in the slow, boring way divorces proceed when they aren't fueled by screaming but by receipts. We settled custody fairly. I kept the house. Heather got her share of equity, calculated cleanly without creative deductions. The kids stayed in their schools. Life became smaller and steadier. And then on a Tuesday morning 6 months later, another voicemail came in. Unknown number. Calm voice. Professional. Hi, this is Tara with Northbridge Title. I'm calling to confirm you received the updated filing. Please note, the previous attempt to initiate title work on 114 Larkspur Drive has been officially closed. Closed. Not processed. Not recorded. Closed. I exhaled, thinking it was over. Then Tara added, almost as an afterthought, "Oh, and Mr. Collins, for your records, the initial file was opened under an LLC name, not a personal name. If you ever see Larkspur Holdings 7 in your mail, that's related." I sat at my kitchen table and stared at my coffee like it had turned into something else. Larkspur Holdings 7. Not Evan. Not Heather. An LLC. A machine. A system. I went to my mailbox and looked through the junk mail I'd ignored. At the bottom was an envelope I didn't recognize. No stamp. Hand delivered. Inside was a single business card. Black. Clean. No logo. Just a name and a number. Larkspur Holdings 7. Asset Recovery. On the back, written in neat block letters, "We don't like lost investments." My mouth went dry. Because Evan wasn't the top of this. He was the middle. And the real betrayal wasn't just my wife choosing someone else. It was realizing someone else had chosen my house first. And they were not done choosing.